Hey, Phil Bradbury here for Little Walter tube amps. If you own a Little Walter 59 or 89 amplifier, whether it's a chassis in a head or a combo, you need to know how to bias your amp, and this is what this video is going to do. It's going to explain to you why you bias your amp and how important it is to bias the amp. Obviously, when you change power tubes in your 59 or 89 Little Walter, you will want to check the bias and make sure that it's set to 35, unless you've done some testing and found that there's another bias setting that suits you better. If you play your amp a lot, you may also want to check them periodically about every 3 or 4 months. Now I'm going to turn around and show you a chassis, and we're going to go through the steps of setting the bias on this chassis. All right, guys and gals, you'll be using your head cabinet, so you'll probably come in from the back of the cabinet, of course, and remove the 2 screws that take the safety panel off the back. Then you'll be able to access from the back of the amp to the bias knob here and to the socket for your first power tube. Now there's 2 different probes that you can use. This is the more inexpensive $30 probe that simply goes in the socket and then plugs into the voltometer, and you use your voltometer to read the bias when you get your power amp on. Okay. For this test, I'm going to be using a slightly more expensive bias probe. This is about $110, I think, less shipping. And both of these came from Eurotubes.com. Okay, now we're ready to install our bias probe. Let's start with tube 1. Pull it out. It's the closest tube to the preamp tubes. And you'll notice that the bias probe and the 6L6 have the same exact bottom on it, and it has a keyway on it. So locate the keyway, push the probe in, then replace the number 1 tube. Now we have the probe installed. We're ready to start. Turn the power of your amp on and give it enough time to warm up. All right, now we've let the amp warm up for a couple minutes. The tubes are starting to get fairly warm. I'm going to take it off of standby, and we're going to watch our meter over here, and it's somewhere around 30 to 31. Well, remember, it's supposed to be at 35, and this amp's been played for several months, so it's probably due to tube wear, it's lost some of its biasing. Now we've got the amp warmed up, we've got the bias probe in, the meter's reading 31. This amp's been played for a few months, so it's fallen off the 35 magic number. So I'm going to ease the red knob, the bias knob, to the right, slowly raising the bias, and I'm going to try to stop at 35 as close as I can get it. And that's pretty good, 35.1, fine. Now, we've got the bias set at 35, and it's going to fluctuate 35, 1, 2, 3, because it's going to fluctuate when you're playing somewhat too, but as close as you can get it. Now, by using a matched set of tubes, we should be able to set the bias for 1 tube and know that the whole amp is good. When I'm doing diagnostics, I will check each tube individually. You can feel safe in doing your first tube, and you're going to be within 1 point of all the other tubes. Now, as you probably know, if you have the opportunity, you would want someone to adjust your bias while you're playing your instrument, and you would want to go higher than 35, maybe lower. I doubt lower, but you might want to go a little higher. Remember, you can go higher on the bias. 35 is the number that we find works the best for these amps, but you may find a magic spot at 37 or 38 or some number, and that's what I urge you to do. Okay, so I'm putting the amp back on standby. In fact, I'm actually going to turn it off because I'm done now. I'm going to be very careful, use a hot glove, and I'm going to remove the tube. I'm going to remove the bias probe, and I'm going to replace the tube, and we're completely done. Now remember, you're going to be setting your bias while it's still in the cabinet. It's not that hard to do. You simply remove the back panel, you reach in, you can get access to this little knob right here. You're only going to have to take this tube out. If you're using a 59, you will have 2 power tubes, these just like that. You'll simply pull that one, check your bias, put the tube back, you're done. I would suggest doing this every 3 or 4 months if you play a lot. If you don't play a lot, every 6 months would be wonderful. And obviously, when you put in a new set of tubes, you will always set the bias back to 35.